The morning sunlight slipped quietly through the curtains, resting gently on the unfamiliar walls of the bedroom. Samara opened her eyes slowly. For a second, she forgot where she was. Then reality settled in. This wasn't her parents' home. This wasn't the room she had grown up in. This was their room. She turned her head slightly and saw Ayan sleeping beside her, his face relaxed, one arm resting carelessly on the pillow between them. Even in sleep, there was a distance, not cold, not intentional, just newness. 3 months. That's how long they had been married. Not strangers. Not lovers. Something in between. Samara quietly got out of bed, careful not to wake him. She wrapped her shawl around herself and walked toward the kitchen. The house still felt like a guest house, clean, organized, but missing warmth. As if the walls were waiting for stories to soak into them. She began making breakfast, following a routine she had created for herself. Not because anyone asked her to, but because routine gave her control. As the kettle boiled, her thoughts wandered. Marriage was supposed to feel like belonging. Instead, she often felt like she was learning a new language, one where every word needed thought before being spoken. Ayan entered the kitchen quietly, hair slightly messy, sleeves of his shirt rolled up.
"Good morning," he said.
She smiled. Morning. Simple words. Safe words. They sat at the dining table, the clinking of cutlery filling the gaps between sentences. Ayan checked his emails. Samara watched the steam rise from her cup of tea. "How did you sleep?" he asked, without looking up.
"Fine," she replied.
A pause. "You?" "Same." That was how most conversations went lately, polite, brief, incomplete. It wasn't that Ayan didn't care.
He did. Deeply.
But care didn't always know how to express itself. Before leaving for work, he hesitated near the door. "Do you need anything?" he asked. Samara shook her head. "No, I'm good." He nodded, smiled, and left. The door closed softly. And suddenly, the house felt bigger. The afternoons were the hardest. Samara cleaned, rearranged things that didn't need rearranging, scrolled through her phone without purpose. Sometimes she stood by the window, watching other lives move forward, people walking, laughing, existing with ease. She missed being known. Back at her parents' home, she didn't have to explain her silences. Here, silence felt like something she needed to justify. When Ayan returned in the evening, exhaustion followed him inside. "Long day," he said, loosening his tie. She nodded. "Dinner will be ready in a bit." They ate together. Talked about work. About bills. About plans that felt practical, but distant. Later, they stood on the balcony, city lights flickering below. "It's strange," Samara said after a while, her voice soft. "Sharing a life with someone you're still getting to know." Ayan leaned against the railing. "I think everyone feels that way at first." She looked at him. "And later?" He thought for a moment. "Later, you either stop trying to know each other, or you fall deeper." Her heart tightened at his honesty. That night, as they lay in bed, there was space between them again. Not because they didn't want closeness, but because neither knew how to reach for it without fear. Samara stared at the ceiling. Marriage wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was quiet, confusing, and heavy with unspoken emotions. But somewhere beneath the awkwardness, beneath the silence, there was something steady. Potential. 2 people learning not how to love, but how to choose each other. Every day. And that was where their story truly began. The rain started sometime after midnight. Not loud enough to wake the city, but steady enough to change the mood of the house. Samara woke up before dawn, the soft sound of droplets tapping against the balcony railing filling the room. She lay still for a moment. Beside her, Ayan slept on his back, one arm folded over his chest, his breathing slow and even. In the dim light, he looked younger, less guarded, less burdened by responsibility. She wondered what he dreamed about. Did his dreams still belong to the life he had before her? Or had she found a place in them yet? Carefully, she slipped out of bed and walked to the balcony. The city looked washed, softened by the rain. The world felt paused. She hugged her arms around herself, lost in thought. Marriage was strange. You shared a home, a bed, a future, yet sometimes felt like you were still knocking on each other's doors. Behind her, she heard movement. "You're up early." She turned. Ayan stood there, rubbing his eyes, his voice rough with sleep. "I couldn't sleep," she said honestly. He nodded and stepped beside her. They stood shoulder to shoulder, not touching, watching the rain together. After a long pause, he spoke. "Are you okay here?" The question surprised her. Not "are you happy?" Not "do you need anything?" But "are you okay here?" She took a moment before answering. "I'm trying to be," she said softly. "Some days are easier than others." Ayan exhaled slowly, as if he had been holding something in for a long time. "I worry," he admitted, "that I don't say the right things. Or enough things." She looked at him, then really looked at him. "I worry about that too," she said. "For my side." Something shifted in that moment. Not closeness yet, but honesty. That morning felt different. They had breakfast together again, but this time Ayan didn't check his phone. He listened when Samara talked about her day, about a book she had started, about how the rain reminded her of home. Before leaving, he hesitated, then said, "I might come back late today. There's a meeting." She nodded. "Okay." Then, almost as an afterthought, he added, "I'll message you."
And he did.
Just one text in the afternoon. "Did you eat lunch?" She stared at the screen longer than necessary before replying. "Yes."
Did you?
It wasn't romantic, but it felt intentional. That evening, when he finally came home, Samara was sitting on the couch with a blanket around her shoulders. "You're tired," she said. "So are you," he replied. She smiled at that. They didn't talk much. Just sat there, the TV playing something neither of them was really watching. At one point, Ayan shifted closer, not dramatically, just enough that their arms brushed. Neither moved away. Later, while washing dishes together, their hands bumped in the sink. Samara instinctively pulled back. "I'm sorry," she said quickly. He shook his head. "It's okay." But this time he didn't step away. That night, the space between them on the bed felt smaller. Not gone, but reduced. As Samara lay there, she realized something important. Marriage wasn't about grand gestures. It was about noticing.
Choosing to stay.
Choosing to ask. Choosing to try, again and again. Ayan turned slightly toward her. "Samara?" "Yes. If I ever make you feel alone," he said quietly, "I want you to tell me." Her throat tightened. "I will," she said, then added, "and you should too." He nodded. No promises were made, but something fragile and real was being built. Slowly, carefully, like learning the shape of each other's silence. And for the first time since the wedding, Samara fell asleep feeling a little less like a guest, and a little more like she belonged. The change didn't arrive suddenly. It slipped in quietly, between shared mornings, half-finished conversations, and moments that didn't seem important enough to remember, yet somehow stayed. Samara noticed it first in the smallest things, like how she began waiting for the sound of the door in the evening. Not anxiously, not desperately, just expectantly. Or how the house didn't feel as empty anymore during the day, because she knew he would return. That morning, Ayan stood in front of the mirror, struggling with the buttons of his cufflinks. Samara passed by, then stopped. "Here," she said, stepping closer. Without thinking, she reached for his wrist and fixed them for him. Their closeness startled them both. For a second, neither moved. She could smell his cologne, subtle, familiar now. He could feel the warmth of her fingers, steady and careful. "Thanks," he said quietly. She nodded and stepped back, her heart beating faster than it should have for something so simple. Later that day, Samara visited a nearby cafe alone. She sat by the window with her coffee, watching couples talk, laugh, exist with ease. She didn't feel jealous. She felt curious. Is this how it starts? She wondered. Not with passion, but with comfort that slowly turns into something you don't want to lose. That evening, Ayan came home earlier than usual. "You're early," she said, surprised. He shrugged. Didn't feel like staying late. They cooked together, awkwardly at first, then naturally. She chopped vegetables while he handled the stove. At one point, he tasted the curry and frowned. It needs salt. She raised an eyebrow. It's perfect. He smiled. Agree to disagree? She laughed softly. It felt easy. After dinner, the power went out. The house fell into darkness, followed by Samara's sharp inhale. It'll come back, Ayan said quickly. He lit a candle and placed it on the table. The flickering light softened his face, made the room feel smaller, warmer. They sat on the floor, backs against the couch. I used to be scared of the dark, Samara said suddenly. You? Ayan asked, surprised. She nodded. Still am. A little. He hesitated, then said, Me too. Just in different ways. She turned toward him. Like what? Like silence, he admitted. And failing the people who depend on me. The honesty lingered between them. Without planning it, Samara leaned her head lightly against his shoulder. He stiffened for half a second, then relaxed. Neither spoke. The candle burned low. That night, when they went to bed, Samara reached for the blanket and realized her hand was already resting closer to his. She didn't move it away. Ayan noticed. He didn't comment. But when he turned off the light, he shifted just slightly so the distance between them disappeared. No touching. Just closeness. Samara's heart felt heavy and light at the same time. She realized then, this wasn't just adjustment anymore. This was attachment. Not the kind that screams. The kind that settles quietly into your chest. The kind where their presence starts to matter more than you expected. As she drifted to sleep, one thought stayed with her. If he wasn't here tonight, I'd feel it. And that scared her. Because need is fragile. And marriage is where fragility learns to trust. The days began to flow into each other more smoothly. Not perfectly, but comfortably. Samara noticed how Ayan now asked before making plans. How he remembered small things. No sugar in her tea, the way she liked the curtains open in the morning, how she grew quiet when something bothered her. And Ayan noticed things too. How Samara waited up at night if he was late. How she folded his clothes with careful precision. How her moods shifted subtly, never demanding attention, yet quietly asking for it. One evening, Ayan came home distracted. Not tired. Not upset. Just elsewhere. How was work? Samara asked as she handed him a glass of water. Fine, he replied too quickly. She sensed it immediately but didn't push. They ate dinner in near silence. The TV played in the background, filling space neither of them wanted to address. Later, Ayan's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, smiled faintly, then put it face down. Samara saw it.
She didn't ask.
But something unfamiliar tightened in her chest. Jealousy wasn't loud. It didn't accuse or demand explanations. It simply sat there, quiet, uncomfortable, unexpected. That night, Samara lay awake longer than usual. It's silly, she told herself. He's allowed to have a life. Still, the smile lingered in her thoughts. The next morning, she was quieter. Ayan noticed. Did I do something? He asked gently while tying his shoes. She hesitated, then shook her head.
No.
Just sleepy. He studied her for a second longer than usual, then nodded. But the question stayed with him all day. That evening, rain returned, soft, steady, familiar. They stood in the kitchen together, the smell of tea filling the air. Samara, Ayan said suddenly, you don't have to hide things from me. Her hands paused mid-motion. I'm not hiding, she said softly. Then tell me, he replied. What changed? She exhaled slowly. I saw you smile at your phone yesterday, she said, eyes lowered. And for a moment, I felt like I wasn't part of that world. The words hung between them, honest, vulnerable, unguarded. Ayan was quiet. Then he spoke. It was my cousin, he said. She's getting divorced. She was scared. Samara looked up, shame flickering across her face. I'm sorry, she said quickly. I shouldn't have assumed. He shook his head.
No.
I'm glad you told me. He stepped closer, not invading her space, just enough to be felt. I don't want to live a life where you feel like an outsider, he said. Even accidentally. Her throat tightened. I don't want to be the kind of wife who doubts you, she replied. He smiled gently. Then let's be the kind of couple who talks, even when it's uncomfortable. That night felt different again. Not lighter, but stronger. Later, as they sat on the couch, Samara rested her head against the armrest. Without thinking, Ayan adjusted the cushion behind her, his hand brushing her hair briefly. She didn't pull away. He didn't linger. But both noticed. When they went to bed, the silence didn't feel awkward anymore. It felt full. Samara turned slightly toward him. Ayan. Yes. Thank you for listening. He smiled in the dark. Thank you for trusting me enough to speak. They slept closer than before. Not tangled. Not dramatic. Just aligned. And in that alignment, something important settled. Marriage wasn't about never feeling insecure. It was about choosing reassurance over distance. Understanding over assumptions. That night, the space between them didn't disappear. It simply learned how to speak. It happened without warning. One day, the house stopped feeling like a place Samara lived in and started feeling like a place she returned to. She realized it on a quiet afternoon. She had gone out to visit an old friend, someone who knew her before marriage, before responsibilities rearranged her priorities. They talked, laughed, remembered old versions of themselves. It was nice. But halfway through the conversation, Samara caught herself glancing at the time. Not because she was bored, but because she knew Ayan would be home soon. The thought startled her. On the way back, she picked up his favorite snack without thinking. It wasn't planned. It just felt natural. When she reached home, Ayan was already there, sleeves rolled up, standing in the kitchen. You're early, she said. So are you, he replied, noticing the bag in her hand. What's that? She handed it to him. I saw it and thought of you. He smiled, not wide, not dramatic, but real. Thank you. That night, something shifted again. They cooked together quietly. No awkwardness, no forced conversation. Just the sound of chopping, sizzling, and occasional glances. At one point, Samara reached for a spoon at the same time Ayan did. Their fingers brushed. This time, neither pulled away immediately. It wasn't intimate. It wasn't charged. It was warm. Later, they sat on the couch, closer than usual. Samara's feet were tucked beneath her, brushing against his leg. Is this okay? She asked softly. He nodded without hesitation. Yeah. The simplicity of his answer stayed with her. That night, when they went to bed, Samara didn't immediately turn away like she usually did. She lay on her side, facing him. Ayan, she said. Yes. Do you ever feel scared, she asked, of doing everything right and still getting it wrong? He took a moment before answering. All the time, he said. Especially here. Here, she asked. With us, he replied. Because this matters. Her chest tightened, not with fear, but with recognition. She reached out, slowly, and rested her hand on the blanket between them, close enough to be felt. He covered it with his own. They didn't intertwine fingers. They didn't move closer. They just stayed. Samara realized something then. She no longer needed constant reassurance. She needed presence. And Ayan was there. The next few days followed the same rhythm. Shared breakfasts. Quick messages during the day. Evenings that felt easier to breathe in. One night, Samara came down with a fever. Nothing serious, but enough to make her weak. Ayan noticed immediately. You're warm, he said, concern sharp in his voice. I'll be fine, she replied. He didn't argue. He brought water, medicine, an extra blanket. When she tried to get up later, she swayed. Instinctively, Ayan reached out and steadied her. Easy, he said. For the first time, she leaned into him without thinking. He held her, carefully, respectfully, firmly. In that moment, Samara felt something settle deep inside her. Safety. Not excitement. Not intensity. Safety. That night, she fell asleep faster than she had in months. Because for the first time since the wedding, home wasn't just walls and routines. Home was the way he noticed, the way he stayed, the way he didn't need to be asked. And Ayan, lying awake beside her, realized something too. Her presence had quietly rearranged his life. Her absence now would be loud. Marriage, he understood, wasn't about grand love stories. It was about becoming each other's quiet certainty. And that certainty had finally begun. Comfort has a strange side effect. Once it settles in, the thought of losing it becomes terrifying. Samara realized this one morning when Ayan left for work without finishing his tea. It was nothing unusual. He was running late, but the untouched cup sat on the table longer than it should have. She kept looking at it, not because of the tea, because lately his presence had begun to matter in ways she hadn't prepared for. That day, Ayan didn't text. Not at lunch. Not in the afternoon. By evening, Samara told herself not to overthink.
He's busy.
You're married, not waiting for permission. Still, when the sky darkened and the clock moved forward, unease settled quietly in her chest. When the door finally opened, relief came before reason. You're late, she said, trying to sound casual. I know, he replied, exhausted. Work got messy. He didn't notice her tone, but she noticed everything. They ate dinner quietly. Ayan talked about deadlines and meetings, his mind still half at the office. Samara listened, but for the first time listening hurt. Later that night, as they lay in bed, the silence felt different. Not empty. Uneasy. Ayan, she said. Yes. You didn't message today, she said softly. He turned toward her immediately. I'm sorry, he said. I didn't even realize. That's the problem, she interrupted, then stopped herself. He waited. I didn't realize how much I notice it, she finished quietly. The honesty startled them both. Ayan sat up slightly. Samara, he said carefully, I don't want you to feel ignored. I don't want to feel dependent, she replied just as softly. The words landed heavily. Dependence wasn't weakness, but it felt dangerous. They lay there, facing each other. You know what scares me? Ayan said after a moment. She shook her head. That this starts to matter so much that I forget how to exist without it. Her chest tightened. I already feel that, she admitted. And I don't know when it happened. There was no argument. No raised voices. Just two people realizing they had crossed a line they couldn't uncross. Caring deeply enough to be afraid. The next few days were quieter. Not distant, but cautious. They still shared meals. Still slept close. Still checked in. But both were careful not to lean too hard. Until one evening, Samara received a call from her mother. Family pressure. Expectations. Comments that came disguised as concern. Are you happy? Her mother asked. Samara hesitated. I am, she said. Just learning. That night, she sat on the couch longer than usual, wrapped in her shawl. Ayan noticed. What's wrong? He asked. She didn't answer immediately. Then she said, everyone expects marriage to be perfect once love settles. He sat beside her. And no one talks about the fear that comes after, she said. The fear of losing something you finally feel safe in. Ayan took her hand, fully this time. Not hovering, not tentative, firm. We'll be afraid sometimes, he said, but we won't face it alone. She leaned into him, not because she needed to be held, but because she trusted him to stay. That night, they slept closer than ever before. No barrier, no space, just two people choosing presence over fear. And as Samara drifted off, one thought stayed with her. Love doesn't start when comfort arrives. Love starts when fear shows up and you still stay. Some nights don't arrive loudly. They don't bring arguments or tears or dramatic confessions. They arrive quietly, carrying decisions that change everything. It was one of those nights. The house was dim, lit only by a lamp in the corner of the living room. Samara sat on the couch, knees pulled close to her chest, staring at nothing in particular. The day had been heavy, not because something went wrong, but because too many thoughts had stayed unspoken. Ayan noticed the silence the moment he stepped inside. Not the comfortable kind. The careful kind. He didn't ask questions right away. He set his keys down, changed his clothes, moved slowly, giving the moment space to breathe. Finally, he sat across from her. "You're carrying something," he said gently. Samara swallowed. "I'm scared," she admitted. He didn't interrupt. "Not of you," she continued. "Of us. Of how much this now means. Of how much it would hurt if it ever changed." Ayan leaned back slightly, processing her words. "I used to think love was about certainty," he said. "Now I think it's about risk." She looked at him. "I don't want to lose myself in this," she said. "But I don't want to build walls either." He moved closer, sitting beside her, not touching yet. "Then don't lose yourself," he said. "Stand next to me. Not behind me.
Not inside me.
Beside me." Her eyes filled, not with sadness, but relief. Marriage had taught her many things. But the hardest lesson was this. Love isn't about merging lives until nothing remains separate. It's about choosing closeness without erasing distance. She reached for his hand. Not hesitantly. Not nervously. Intentionally. Ayan held it, steady and sure. That night, they talked longer than they ever had. About expectations. About fears. About the versions of themselves they were still learning to protect. No promises of forever perfection. No dramatic declarations. Just honesty. Later, as they lay in bed, Samara rested her head against his chest. His arm came around her naturally, without thought. The room felt quiet, but not empty. For the first time, the silence didn't ask questions. It answered them. Ayan kissed the top of her head, slow and careful. "Whatever changes," he said softly, "we'll keep choosing." She nodded against him. Marriage, she realized, wasn't a destination. It was a daily act of courage. To stay soft. To stay open.
To stay.
As sleep claimed them, the house no longer felt new or unfamiliar. It felt lived in, warmed by shared breath, shared fear, shared resolve. And in that stillness, they didn't become a perfect couple. They became something better.
Real.
Two people who learned that vibing isn't about constant happiness. It's about growing together without losing yourself. And choosing each other. Even when it's quiet. Even when it's hard. Even when it's scary. That night, love didn't arrive with fireworks. It stayed. And that was enough.